There's no reason why that couldn't be your story.
You don't have an expiration date.
I love that.
The actual pages. Like, that's all that matters at the end of the day.
This is the Authors and Agents podcast. Daphne, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to be able to chat with you, to get to know you a little bit more, and to hear about your book. So start by telling me about your latest release coming out December 5th, I Will Find You.
Sure. Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here. And my book, I Will Find You, that comes out, I guess today, December 5th, is the third book in the Secrets and Lies novels. These books are not a series. They are companion books. Each one takes place at the same middle school in a small town in upstate New York called Snow Valley. And this is the third year that something goes a little bit wrong in the seventh grade. What happens is this: there is a yearly camping trip at the local campground up in the mountains, and kids are assigned to sleep in cabins. In this particular year, there has to be a cabin with 2 girls and 2 boys in it, but that's okay. There's a teacher. They're in separate rooms. So that night, the first night of the camping trip, 4 kids go to sleep in the cabin. But in the morning, only 3 students are there. Nikki has disappeared. And that is the story. What has happened to Nikki, and where is he now?
I love it. Oh my gosh. I think back to like me in middle school, and wouldn't that have been the coolest to be like, I can be a detective and solve this, mystery. Oh my gosh, that was so fun. And I love middle grade. I have children who are not quite to middle grade ages yet, but I love to read them. And on this podcast, I've interviewed middle grade authors, and I read those books, and I'm like, there's just something so light and refreshing, coming from reading like adult or YA books, which can be a lot heavier, a lot more serious, whereas you still get this thrilling like mystery, but it's a little bit lighter, which is nice.
Yeah, I agree. When I first began writing, I started writing YA. And then after I wrote my first middle grade book, I didn't want to go back because there is something, I feel like you can touch on the most powerful and universal themes in middle grade, but there's an optimism that's just kind of built into writing around that age. And you always just want to, connect to a feeling of hope when you're writing these books. And so it's just, I spend so much time working on a book. It's really nice to live in a space that just feels hopeful and, values human connection and is still dealing with profound things.
Yeah, my 3-year-old and we read, like really beginner chapter books together, like read alouds before bed. And I love that about them. And in my head, I'm like, this would be so fun to write too, because it's just so, there's just something different about it. And I love it. I think, he enjoys them a lot. So awesome that you found like such a great little spot for you to be in. So this is book number 7 coming out, being published for you. Is that right?
Oh, I guess it is. Yeah, it is.
So hopefully I counted right. So what an accomplishment, having 7 books published out in the world. So tell me about your journey to this point through publishing.
Sure. So for a long time, I knew that I wanted to be a writer, but it wasn't until I connected with the fact that I wanted to write for young people that I realized that I started to get story ideas. And so because I wanted to teach, I went and I got an MFA at the New School. And the program at the time was just a really great place to be. It connected you, because it's in New York City, it connected you with a lot of people in the publishing industry. So actually, the thesis project that I wrote at the end of my second year ended up being my first book. It was published by an editor that I had met at the program that one of our teachers brought in. She was at HarperCollins at the time. And and so that's how I started. And then I wrote a second YA book. And then after that, I started writing middle grade, and I started with The Angel Tree, which is focused on Christmas, which is my favorite holiday.
Oh,
And yeah, and I just kept writing them from there. But a few years ago, I was sitting down to come up with a new book idea, and I started to think about the things that I loved when I was in middle grade. And who I came up with was Lois Duncan. I just remember being riveted by her books. Like they would like impact me so deeply. My heart would be beating, and like, my throat would be dry in these tense moments. And her books are they're so sparse, and they're so tightly and smartly plotted. And just at the end, it always takes your breath away. It's
yeah.
incredible. And so, I thought I had so much fun reading them. Maybe I could try to write that, like a kind of combo thriller mystery. And so that was how I started writing the Secrets and Lies novels. And so that is what I've been working on since then. But I want to be very clear about something. I've written a lot of books that did not get published and a lot of proposals that didn't come out. It's not like everything I wrote, was just immediately embraced, or, that it was a smooth road. It was hard. There were some books that I really loved that like my editor just didn't see a place for in the market. So they live on my computer, maybe one day.
So are you currently represented by an agent?
I am. I have an amazing agent who I adore. Her name is Sarah Crow. She's at Sarah Crow Literary, and she is fabulous and wonderful. And I feel very lucky to be with her. We have been together a long time.
That's wonderful. So how did you guys connect? Were you able to, once you connected with the editor, kind of go out in the querying process and
Yeah.
say, I have, this
I have
example.
interests, and this is what I write. And, and I did some research, of course, with the help of like friends and, teachers in my MFA program, and found people who I felt like would be a good fit for me. And then the ones who were interested, I met with at the time I lived in New York City. So that was easy. And I'm not that all agents are in New York City. There's actually an amazing agency right here in Colorado.
Yeah.
You can be anywhere. But at the time, the people that I was querying were in New York. And so I met with them, and Sarah and I hit it off. And it's kind of funny, like we've gone through all these life changes together. Like she knew me right after I adopted my children. And I remember when she was pregnant with her first baby. And now my babies are big and they're in college, and hers are in middle and high school. I mean, it's just,
I love
we've been
it.
through a lot, book-wise and life-wise together.
Yeah. That's so wonderful. So if you, looking back on, you have a different experience maybe than most to cold querying, like you had such great connections through your MFA program, which is wonderful and a reason to do something like that. But looking back and kind of what you know about the industry and your experience, do you have any query tips, like tips for people who are querying right now?
So I would say this. I think that publishing, like many, many industries, is very connection based.
Mm.
And that is what is so great about doing an MFA. If you're interested in teaching, I don't think an MFA makes sense if you're not. I mean, it can if you're interested by all means. And, you can deepen your craft, and that's really important. It's just, they're expensive.
Yeah.
But that is what I think is so great about SCBWI, is that you have a chance to meet people and make connections. Like so I recently moved to Colorado, and I went to the first my first Rocky Mountain SCBWI conference. And when I was there at one point, I was working on something. So I sat out the sessions, and I ended up getting into a really great chat with this agent. We talked about our kids, and just, I'm agented, but that could have been anyone sitting there, someone who wasn't agented, and connected with this person just casually, because we both had some work to do during this particular session. So, I do think that is a great thing to do if you can do it. Like, I know that there are a lot of local conferences. I know that great people go to them. I know that if you go to their sessions, that like you can query and you can get in the door. And it's not that you can't cold query. It's not that you have to do this. I just think it makes it easier.
It definitely it gives you a little bit of a step up, because querying, what we hear all the time, right? It's timing, it's luck. It just is which it sort of is. And so if you can have something where you can have just a little bit of, a leg up, that can be so helpful.
Yeah, it really can.
Yeah. Well, that's good advice. And yeah, those conferences are great. I went to, I think it was the Writer's Digest novel writing conference in LA. It had to have been like 2017 or something. I was deathly ill and I like didn't
Oh,
even go to
yes.
part of it because of course I got sick and it was so bad. But
Totally.
I remember the few things that I was able to go to before it really hit me were so valuable and just great to connect
Mhm.
with other people, like-minded people. So that's definitely a good thing to remember.
Yeah, and I will say too, it's not like like I've been publishing for a little while, and but the industry has changed a lot since I've been at. Like, I always learn things at those conferences. Like, I think that the craft sessions are pretty fantastic, and then the ones just about the business. Like I learned a lot,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so there's that too.
Yes, it is. It is always changing.
Yes, so it
So,
is.
so speaking about I Will Find You and this great Secrets and Lies, novel set that you're creating, what is something you hope people take away from this latest release?
So I will say probably two things. So the first thing that is a theme that is in like pretty much everything I write is this idea that we don't know everybody else's story, that it's just very, very easy to judge someone quickly, especially based on the way that they interact with you. Someone's being annoying or they're rude or, whatever it is that might be putting you off. That sometimes if you understand where someone is coming from, you just have this incredible new perspective, and that's something that it took me a while to learn as a human. And so I think that that's why it's something that's so important in my books. Like just this idea that like maybe we hold back on those very quick judgments of
Yeah,
other people, and we wait and we find out. And then when we do find out other people's stories, it's just this incredible thing where you grow more as a person. You're like, wow, there's more in the world than I understand. And now this is something that I can see and I can see differently. And it's a way that I just think we're always growing, no matter how old we are. And so that is a theme that is in everything I write, just because it's always in my mind. It comes out, I don't plan it, it's just always there.
right.
Um, and then so that's something that I hope that people are able to take with them after they read it. And I also just want it to be fun. I hope that it's entertaining. I A couple of years ago when my kids went to high school and they didn't need me as home as much, like I'd always written part-time, so I had time, and I went to school and I became a librarian. And I worked for 3 years in Brooklyn at an elementary school, and now I'm working in Denver at a junior senior high. And a lot of the kids I work with are the kids who come in and say, I don't like reading. And I
Mhm.
just feel like, all right, gauntlet thrown. Like, we're going to find you a book. Like, the issue
Right,
is that you haven't found what you love to read. And it's possible it's not a book. You know what I mean? Like, it's possible that what you need to read is something else, but generally we're going to find you a book in the library. And
right.
so I do think you need things that are fun and quick. I make a point of making my books short. Um, so that someone's not like, this is too long, and or it's intimidating. It's something you feel like you would have time to read, and then also that just has a real quick hook to get you in. And they're not for everybody, no book is, but if this is the kind of thing that's going to hook you in, I want it to hook you in right away, and I want you to be able to stay for the ride.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think we all need a little bit more of that. My stepson who's 9, he's at the point where I think he's just got so much going on in his brain. He loves football right now, and whenever I try to get
Mm.
him to read, he's just like, "Ugh, this is the worst." I'm trying to find some football stories or something
Right,
to
right.
get into. His mind's just working a little too fast, I think, to sit down and slow
Yeah. Mm.
it. So speaking about, finding something you love to read, who are some of your favorite authors and why do you enjoy reading them?
Sure. So I have so many, but I'll tell you a few. For middle grade, one of my favorite authors is Kelly Yang, like Front Desk. I just love that book so much. And it was so fun to share at my old school. And then I was so excited to come to my new school and be able to share it with kids here. And she's written so many other books that like, you're just like, great. Like you love this first one because of course you did. And now we're just going to keep reading. I've also worked with most of the kids that I've ended up working with in this school. Many are immigrant families, recent or, in the past 10 or 15 years. And also we had in Brooklyn, like a huge mix of different ethnicities and races. And so her books touch on that. And there's a lot of good stuff that you can talk about. It sparks good discussion. And I think it's also a place where kids are able to see aspects of their lives that aren't always in books. So I love that. Like I love, love, love her books. I have a book that's probably my favorite of all the books in the whole world. It is written by Matt de la Pena. It is a picture book. It's called Milo Imagines the World. And it's basically the most beautiful take on my favorite theme of everybody has a story. And we actually did that my first year at my old school as a one book, one school, and every kid got a copy of it. He came and he Zoomed with us because it was COVID. So he came
I
only
love
over
that.
the video.
Right.
But that was really wonderful. And it was so special for the kids to hear him talk about it. But that book, I just recommend so highly. I mean, I love all his stuff, like his YA, his middle grade, his other picture books. But that one is just particularly close to my heart. I do give it as a gift because I think it is so special for people of all ages. And then other authors that I love in the YA world, Elliot Schreifer, Mariana Bauer are two of my big favorites. I love a lot of thrillers. Karen McManus is, I like, One of Us is Lying is like, I couldn't believe it when I read it. I had the Lois Duncan feeling. Lois Duncan, of course,
Yeah.
is one of my top faves. Love her stuff. And I think that she's good for like middle school as well as high school. Her books are so good. I mean, whatever. The last one of hers I read at like 25. So they're good for all ages in my mind, or, middle school and up. But yeah, I love her books too, very much.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So thinking about authors who are in the beginning stages. So, before when you were like, okay, I want to do this, but I'm not quite sure where to go from here or what's the best path forward for me. What advice would you give to your younger self, an aspiring author?
Sure. I think the most important thing is to write your story and understand that no one has ever written it before. Like you are the only you in the whole universe. You are the only you who has ever existed and whoever will. And so that story that you have, or the stories that you have, they're important and they haven't been heard and told before. So, put them out there because that matters and because your voice matters. And having faith in that, I know for me, is still very hard, but it's true, and it's something that I think that we should all hold close and remember. I think that remembering that rejection is just part of it always. And, I'm sure that's not true for some people, but for the majority of us, it is.
Yeah.
It's just a regular occurrence. And so what you do is you feel bad for a little bit, you eat some chocolate, and then you write something else. And I think the ability to pivot, like, especially if you hear back from someone, I really like this book, but I'm not sure I could sell it because of X, Y, and Z, you might want to think of doing a pivot, writing something slightly different. Like maybe if what you've been sending in is, very heartfelt, realistic fiction, maybe you do a pivot to horror, but something that's fun for you. Most of us read have a number of genres that we love. So it's like maybe think about a pivot or, or an age difference or something where you're still telling a story that's authentic in yours, but seeing if maybe there's another door into the market. And then also making those connections, being connected online, seeing what are agents looking for, if it's something that you're like, oh, hey, I would love to write a fantasy, about giraffes, like then, and that that's something that someone is looking for, then maybe you can do that.
Yeah. I think it's important to find the balance in that of writing something that's of your heart, that's just you, like that you're passionate about, that could also be sellable. I think that's the hard thing about trying to be traditionally published, is because that's not always going to match up.
Mm-hmm. No, it's 100% true. And, and then it's questions like there's a woman at my school who self-publishes and it makes her very happy. That is the right thing for her to do and the way for her to share her, her work and her ideas. And so I think we all get to, make a choice of what we want to try to do. But yeah, if you're going to go traditional, it's work. It's just definitely work, and it's rejection, and that's always hard.
Yeah, it's work both ways, definitely, right? Indie or traditional. But there's more gatekeepers in traditional that you've got to work
Exactly.
to get exactly through it. And
Right.
that's,
Whereas self-published, like you do the beautiful work of creating a book and then you get to share it. And you get to share it in the way you want it. I mean, it is kind of funny when you sell your book to a traditional publisher, it's theirs, it's not yours anymore, you know?
yeah,
But if you self-publish, that's always yours.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's definitely a good thing to remember. So, what do you most enjoy about writing? And then what is the most challenging thing for you when you're writing?
Sure. So definitely getting to live more than one life. Like
Mm,
that's why I love to read too, is like I fall into someone else's life and I get to live someone else's story for a period of time. And when I'm writing, it's even more exciting or exciting in a different way because I'm in charge and like I'm a control freak. I find the uncertainty of the world unsettling and hard. And when I'm writing, I'm in charge of the world. There's no
yeah,
uncertainty there, you
yeah,
know? And like, yes, things will pop up for my subconscious when I'm writing and that will surprise me, but I'm in charge. I get to decide if it stays. And I love that. I love creating characters. It's every character that I write is some aspect of my personality that I get to explore in a new way. So there's a mental health aspect of it. I find it very balancing. It's one of those things I talk to my students about, like, where is that place where you're most you, where you're so yourself, you just, you know, like you are what you're doing. And that is how I feel when I write. And I love that feeling. Two challenges, if I'm allowed to cheat and put in two
yeah.
in my answer to that one. The first one is finding time.
Mm,
That was never a problem for me early. I mean, well, it was a problem for me when my kids were babies. And then when they were toddlers, I would
yes.
just write when they napped. And it was a very, you know, it was a finite amount of time. I was lucky. They were nappers. It certainly didn't write at night. I went to bed about the time they did because they tired me out so much. But that, you know, that time was set. And then when they went to school, I had a very set schedule and you know it was timed or you know around their day.
Right.
And then as they got older I had even more time and I could put in things like a yoga class, and so that was very exciting. And then when they went to high school is when I went back to school, but being in school was a good balance with writing. And then when I started working in a library, that's when time became challenging.
Mm,
um, because library work is so fun, but it's so tiring and it's so all consuming that when I come home, I don't necessarily have the best brain for getting into writing. And so that's a challenge. And it's actually a bigger challenge here than it was in New York because shockingly, the school day is almost an hour longer here, which I feel is a very bad idea. I
interesting.
really like the amount of time that we had in New York. I'm not as fond of the hour
Yeah.
longer that we have here in Colorado. I mean, I love being with, you know, my big teen babies longer, but it's less time in the day. And then the other thing is I have a long commute, which I don't care for.
Mm, yeah.
So that makes time more challenging too. The other thing is getting started, especially if I have taken a break for various reasons. Like, you know, like if I've handed in a manuscript to my editor, I'm usually not going to start something new. I'm going to wait to hear back from her.
Yeah.
And my edits are hardcore. I mean, you know, we're not talking a polish. Like I have to do a lot of work when I get back that first edit letter. And sometimes even the second one. I'm very lucky that I have such a hands-on editor. She is such a gift and she makes my work so much better. But I've lost the habit of writing and getting it back is so hard. Like I
Yeah.
find that I'm best when I write every single day. And so anytime I fall out of that, getting started again is really hard.
Yeah, I mean yeah, the time, creating the time is hard, and so then when you do, and you get into that routine, and then when you get a break, you're like, oh, okay, whew, a little relief, and then you're like, oh crap, I gotta get back into
I
it.
forgot how to do it. I feel like it's working out or yoga or something. Like you miss a
Yeah,
couple of weeks and you're like, oh my God, I'm so
mhm,
stiff. Like
yeah,
what is happening?
yeah,
So like my
exactly.
writing muscles get stiff.
Yes. So I feel like you've already done this a little bit, just through the books that you've had published. But if you were to genre hop into a new genre that you haven't written before, what would you most like to try?
Um, I have a fantasy about writing an adult rom-com that
Yeah.
focuses on adoption.
Oh,
And the
that'd
reason
be
for
awesome.
that, my kiddos are adopted. Many folks have adopted children, but the happily ever after in any kind of adult book that's dealing with children is always a biological child. And I actually had a friend years ago who wrote adult books, and she handed into her editor a manuscript where the couple end up adopting a child. And the editor said, no one wants to read an adoption story. They only want a story where there's like a biological child, a conception. And I just thought that's not true. Like, that
No.
is just simply not true. Like, even if you have biological children, like, who wouldn't love a story about adoption?
Yeah,
It
I
can
would
be such
love
a beautiful
that.
thing. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
that's a big genre hop because it's age two, but that is the book that I would like to one day write.
I think that would be wonderful. I think you're right. I have biological children and stepchildren, and I would totally still love a romance book that included adoption. I mean, that would be,
Yeah.
yeah,
Totally,
kids are
stepchildren
kids.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like some of the ones that are out there, like what was that book? Oh, it was done recently. That's
Yes.
what it
The
is.
last thing he told me, right? What was
Yes,
it?
the
Yeah.
last detail. Oh wait, let me find out the author.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Oh, I remember seeing that.
was it? I didn't see the show. I just read the book. Is it good?
I haven't seen the show either. I don't have time to read it or to watch new shows.
Yeah, I
The
believe
last
it.
thing he told me by Laura Dave.
Thank you, Laura
Yeah.
Dave. I kept thinking Laura Dern. I'm like, no, that's not right.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. For me, is reading about stepkids can sometimes be, it's sometimes I look at it and I'm like, this person doesn't actually have stepkids.
No, I believe it. A number of my friends have stepkids, and it's such a special and unique relationship. And it varies in all kinds of ways. And I would love more representation of that in books.
Yeah, it does. It has its wonderful parts. It has its very difficult parts.
Like all the many, many kinds of parenting, right?
Yes, like every kind of parenting.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to see that book on the shelf someday. So we're going to be looking for it.
Thank you. Hopefully, hopefully.
Yes. So I just have a few questions left. They're just like fun, easy questions. So, who has been the biggest supporter of your writing?
Okay, I'm going to cheat again. I did too. My
Okay.
mom is the first one. She read to me every night when I was a little girl. I had that classic childhood experience of her reading me Charlotte's Web and crying at the end when Charlotte dies. Then, of
Oh.
course, when I read it to my own children, I too cried. And this is kind of funny, but my mom was a teacher at a small private Quaker school, and I went there for high school. And she was my English teacher. And so she was actually my first creative writing teacher, too. And she was an excellent teacher. She was such a good teacher. And yeah, we just always like shared books and shared that passion. And then when I started writing, she was really supportive. And then the second person is my husband, because he's just always really believed in my writing and had faith in me around it, even the years when I didn't sell a book or, wasn't making very much money. Like, he's just always been super, super supportive of me. He certainly couldn't be a writer without his emotional support and the years that, he was more financially responsible for our family.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm glad you had both of those people to help you and influence you, through
I am lucky. I'm
it.
very lucky.
Wonderful. So when you're writing, when you've made the time, you're sitting down, you're there, you've got it. What do you have like a favorite writing snack or a favorite drink, like something you have to have close by?
That is an excellent question. So, first of all, I can never write on an empty tummy. So, I write best in the morning. I try not to be fussy about writing time because sometimes your time is in the night and you just take it because that's what it's there. But I love to write while I have breakfast. Like, sometimes I have a smoothie with like 75 different things in it. So it's very fun. And then coffee. I'm also, if I'm writing and I require a snack, it's almost always going to be cereal. I love
Yeah,
cereal.
love cereal. What's your favorite kind of cereal?
Cheerios. I know it's very basic, but they're just so soothing and
Is it
classic.
like Honey Nut Cheerios or like
I
plain Cheerios?
like the plain Cheerios, maybe because that's the first year. Like we always had Cheerios when I was a little kid. I grew up in the 70s. It's a long time ago. There were not a lot of cereal choices, but Cheerios, we always had
We
Cheerios.
always I try not to do too sugary cereals for my kids
Uh-huh.
because it's just garbage breakfast, at that point.
Yeah.
So we have Cheerios, we have Honey Bunches of Oats. Those are like our two options. And
Mm.
my husband loves cereal. Cereal is like his favorite thing in the world. And so it's partly for him that I don't have the sugar cereal because he will sit there and eat like 3 bowls. But lately he's been like, these Cheerios, they're so good. Like, I'm like, you're deprived of your cereal.
Right. Aw, that's so nice. Yeah, it's just so yummy and perfect. It's just a
It is.
splendid meal.
It is a splendid meal. It's so good. So, my last question for you. You've given me some answers to this already, which is great, but share some more. So, I'd love to know what your favorite book is right now. Not favorite book of all time, but just something you read recently that you enjoyed.
Okay, something immediately pops to mind. Although we're gonna have to look up the author, but it's Vera Wong's Guide to How to Solve a Murder, How to Find a Murder. It's an adult book, and it's about a woman, Vera Wong, who one day finds a dead body, in her tea shop, which is the first floor of the building where she lives. And she is not satisfied with how the police are investigating. So she takes it upon herself to investigate it. And it has like all my favorite elements, a great mystery. It's really well plotted, super interesting characters, and it's told from different perspectives. So, it has that thing of like
Right.
you start to understand the different characters, but they start to understand each other and the way that they come together in the end. And like Vera has a son and they're slightly estranged, and it just touches on so many things. It's such a good read. I loved it so much. It was the kind of book that when you finish, you're just disappointed it's over. Yet you couldn't wait to get to the end and see how it was all going to turn out. So
Oh,
yeah,
I
I
love
so
that.
highly recommend that one.
Wonderful.
Such a good
The
adult.
author is Jessie Q. Sutanto.
Thank you. I think she's written other stuff too that I put on my library list or, books to buy list. So
Yeah, she's good. I've read a couple of hers as well. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for chatting with me, letting me pick your brain, sharing your experience and your advice. And everybody, please pick up I Will Find You and support Daphne.
thank you so much. It was such fun to talk to you. I am honored that you have me on your show. Thank you.